watching a special News Corp edition of Media Week. I'd like to turn now to what the hacking scandal has done to the News Corp brand, the company's valuation, and of course, by extension, the share price. Joining us in the studio is Tony Boyd. He writes the Chanticleer column for the Australian Financial Review. And in our Sydney CBD studio is Alex Pollack, a top-rated media analyst with Macquarie. Gents, thank you both very much for coming in. Alex, I might just start with you. What's the monetary impact? I mean, what sort of costs are we talking about in terms of what shareholders have had to suck up out of this scandal so far?
Well, they've knocked off, 6 billion Aussie off the value of the stock. So there's, just under 3 billion shares, and they've knocked off $2 Aussie a share. So that's the $6 billion valuation that's been knocked off the company as a whole, and all shareholders have shared in that, so to speak, commensurate with their holdings. So that's the straight nuts and bolts of it right now. And the question is, what happens next? I think there's no doubt that there's, value in the stock. There's value in the company, in the underlying assets. As Mark Day says, there's plenty of underlying assets there, and there's plenty of businesses there, and a lot of them are very, very good businesses. So there's that. But on the other side of it, you've still got question marks over where the whole, where everything will lie once the UK government and the UK judicial process is played out.
Alex, is that uncertainty why you've got a sell or an underperform on the stock?
Yeah. Our comment just was, high-level regulatory uncertainty, and, that will be what it will be. But investors generally don't like regulatory uncertainty. They don't like the idea of judicial issues. And that's a turn-off. People much prefer to just be able to look at the business, make an assessment of the value of the earnings, and then not have to discount for some imponderable, which might be, the way the legal process plays out.
Tony Boyd, on Tuesday, Rupert Murdoch said, I think probably several times, look, News of the World, 1% of our business, and he made that point several times. Is that a bit of a stark reminder of the size of the importance of newspapers ongoing to the company?
Yes, I think it's very instructive that Nomura Securities described the newspaper business as toxic and would not put any value on it. When they looked at a breakup of News Corporation, they had the good, the bad and the toxic. They're not saying that those properties don't make money. They're just saying that the primary business of News Corporation is cable television, filmed entertainment, the internet. So in terms of the focus and future of the company and its growth, it's coming from very different areas than newspapers.
But it's still a very public face, though, of News Corp, isn't it, the newspapers? There's a perception that it was built on newspapers. It's very important. So does that motivate them to really fight harder to clean up this whole sort of mess?
Well, yes, I think Rupert Murdoch drew a lot of political power from the newspapers that he owns around the world, and I think still does. In Australia, America. If you watched the United Kingdom Parliament last night, though, you would have noticed that everyone is distancing themselves from him, and it's happening here as well. And the interesting thing will be if the Republicans in America distance themselves from one of their strongest supporters. The problem, I think, has been well summed up by the ratings agency Standard & Poor's, who obviously they were not the height of probity before the global financial crisis, but they've basically said when you have a criminal investigation, you don't know where it's going to go, and you don't know how bad the reputational damage will be. That's why they put them on negative credit watch, and that's why the credit spreads on News Corp debt have blown out by about 75%. Came back a bit overnight, but that tells you that the credit markets at least are very concerned about the future of the company as a whole.
Alex, I suppose the big shareholdings in News Corp are in the United States, and this story is really, from here anyway, been all about the UK and Australia. Is brand damage in the US, where those big institutional investors sit, is that a big concern for you, as well as what we've been talking about with regulation?
It hasn't. It is a concern. It hasn't played out yet as something to be concerned about. People keep talking about this whole problem, as it were, jumping the pond, and they mean the Atlantic Ocean, big pond. So they're saying it hasn't jumped across to the US yet, but you've had, plenty of senators and plenty of congressmen and plenty of regulatory agencies saying, well, we might need to look at various parts of what happened in the UK and see whether it's got any ramifications with respect to the US assets. So there is the potential for that to drift into the United States, and if it does, then there'll be, a lot more negative cascading effects, a lot more negative effects.
Let's look at the glass half full angle for a minute. If the worst is out, if all the skeletons are now out of the closet, is there then upside for the share price?
Well, as Tony says, if you could be certain of that, the answer to that probably is yes. But the trouble with the judicial process, and again, S&P, has some form on this particular problem itself with respect to the GFC. But the trouble with the judicial process, the legal process, is that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know where it's going to pan out on a 6-month or a 1-year view, and so you don't know what the potential downside is going to be. So that is a negative when someone is trying to put a value on a stock price.
Tony, some of the harshest critics of Murdoch through all this are saying, look, the company should be broken up, just get rid of some of the newspapers or sell them off or whatever. Presumably that's probably not going to happen, but are there buyers for old media assets in a really challenging environment these days?
Well, I don't think we should forget how much money the company makes in newspapers. It's quite substantial. The last accounts I looked at from ASIC for the Australian business was about 300 million. So let's put an EBITDA on that of about 9, and it's a pretty significant business that could be sold off in an IPO and partly owned by News Corp. But the problem is this company doesn't need cash. It doesn't need to sell assets to raise money. It has 12 billion in cash. It has 2.8 billion in annual cash flow. It is one of the most liquid and strongest companies in the media in the world. So what we're really talking about is, what did the directors of the company know? When did they know it? And from that evidence we saw the other night, they didn't know anything. And who knows when they were told? Was it in January? Was it in June when the statement was put out that, when more further information was given to the police? I think what people are looking for now is some changes. Now, the board apparently reviews its succession planning every year. It is, I find, a little funny that Rupert Murdoch is on a very large retention payment because he might leave and go to another company. Now, that's in their SEC filings, but it is true that he is the company. So I can't see him giving up control of it. It's just a question of who he allows to run it. And the Chief Operating Officer, Chase Carey, is very well respected and has built businesses before he came to News Corp. But to get back to your original question, he's not a newspaper man.
Mm-hmm. There's been calls around for quite a long time for News to have a look at restructuring the way it's a dual structured, dual shares. It's got its A and its B class shares. Different people have different voting rights. Those calls have again come out in recent days from at least one of the really big institutional shareholders in the United States. Is that more of an excuse, I suppose, to try and force News Corp to revisit that issue? Because certainly a lot of people don't like it.
It is very interesting that it's come out. I mean, CalPERS, you're talking about, which I proudly say the Financial Review broke that story. Our correspondent in Washington, Ben Potter, got the information first, and then it was broken to other media outlets. But I think the point about it is that this sort of agitation has never happened before. People saw it as a completely waste of time. Why would the Murdoch family give up control of a business worth $40 billion? They're not going to. And the fact that overnight the Saudi prince, his name Allah will... Look, I won't attempt it, but he owns 7% of the voting stock. He's backing Murdoch. He said they had a wonderful performance in front of that committee, and I think that takes Murdoch very close to 48% of the company's voting shares, which is basically control. Although we have seen in the past, John Malone came along and bought 20% of the company. His attempts to, I suppose you'd say, greenmail Murdoch worked effectively, and he ended up with DirecTV. Sadly, News Corp sold that at $20 a share. It's now worth $52. Who were the biggest beneficiaries of that? Certainly not the minority shareholders of News Corp.
Alex Pollack, do you price in more or potentially less risk because of the corporate governance of News Corp, the way it's structured, the way it's set up?
There are risks from the way it's set up on a corporate governance basis today, and we haven't priced those risks at this point, but it's sufficient to say that there are negative implications for the stock price from here for the corporate governance risks in News Corporation. As I said, we haven't put a number on them, but I think they exist, and you kind of can't put a number on them formally until you actually know specifically what it is that you don't know, and right now we don't know that.
Alex, could we expect to see the company perform or run any differently post Murdoch?
Oh yes. I think you can expect to see the company run very differently post-Murdoch. I think you can expect to see the company run very differently from today, actually, from when this whole stuff, from when the parliamentary inquiry in the UK took place. You know, that's year dot, that's year zero. You know, that was a picture of the United Kingdom Parliament, not saying, you know, we're looking to extract judicial revenge, so to speak, but it was a picture of the UK government saying there has to be a proper distance between the press and the government, and that was a picture of what that process was about. That was a public statement about that, and so we are already seeing the company operate differently.
Alex, from a managerial perspective, would you be happy with Chase Carey at the helm?
Chase Carey is a extremely capable, probably one of the most capable people in US media and global media today. Yeah, that's a good thing.
All right, Alex Pollock, thank you. And Tony Boyd, thanks to you.
Thank you.
Good to see you both. We have to take a break. Coming up on Media Week, a new look. Southern Cross Austereo unveils the company's new branding as it continues to bed down the merger. We'll have a chat with CEO Rhys Holleran in just a moment.